but you are interacting with a person. There is a person behind that character. That person is black, they're white, they're young, they're old, gay, they're straight, they're a man, they're a woman, and they have their own opinions. They have their own they have their own life. Welcome to the latest episode of Arcadio. This week we're going to be discussing video games as art and video games as a medium for social and political change. This already sounds like an introduction to prime time or something like that. And joining me on the panel, we have Anthony, Andy, and SoC will be joining us to discuss and hopefully debate. Because if we're all just going to agree with each other, it's going to be awful.
I disagree.
Great.
That's great. I think you're completely wrong. What the hell?
Someone throw a chair.
Podcade.
I'm not this again.
I side with Anto on this.
No.
Get out, both of you. So the reason we didn't just pick a random idea out of our random idea hat.
You didn't?
Well, that's what we're telling people we didn't.
Damn it, Andy.
We this has all kind of come about during the week. I don't know how many of our listeners are aware or got the chance to see it, but Nintendo of America came out after a petition went online, started by Ty Marini, to have same-sex marriage included in the Western copies of the Tomodachi Life. Basically, a Sims meets Your Me kind of a game. It's not exactly a game that's made to shock and wow and basically change gaming as we know it. It's a fairly simple game. I don't know how many of you looked at the style of it, but it looks like Wii Sports.
It's a David Lynch film that you can control. Like, it's just meant to be a wacky Sims, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. But originally the game when it came out in Japan, same-sex marriage was available. But this was tagged as a glitch. It was corrected. Same-sex marriage is considered illegal in Japan. The glitch was fixed by Nintendo, but gamers in the US and Europe, and in particular Ty Marini, started the miiquality petition, want same-sex marriage included, and want Nintendo to put it back in. Nintendo came out and basically said, this wasn't something we intended. We don't intend on making a political statement. We never meant, it wasn't meant to be social commentary. So we're not really getting pulled into this, and put their hands up to their ears and went back and forth saying la 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 la. I'm assuming you guys all saw the story.
Yep.
What was your kind of initial reaction? I mean, mine was kind of like, are you stupid?
I was surprised that it was Nintendo. Like, it never, like, I'm surprised because they've always been conservative in the way they make games, in the sense that, like, it's been the same IPs for the last 20 years, but they've always been very much at the outside in terms of, like, very safe, very family friendly, and very kind of like, this is the last thing you're ever going to see from them is any kind of political or otherwise debate from them. The games are always just going to be, fundamentally just fun games that you can read into if you want, but they're not really designed to be read into. They're just like simple experiences, and yeah.
For me, it was more kind of a logistic thing. I just kind of thought, like, with the point where they are at the moment, they need to be begging people to buy their shit. Like, and I know the 3DS is selling well, but it's still not reaching their expectations. And the Wii U is really, really underperforming. So this could have been an opportunity to get a huge amount of people on their side and rallying for them, kind of going, yeah, you know what, Nintendo actually took a stand. Wow, I'm going to go and support them by throwing money on the counter at my local game store, But instead, they kind of chose to cop out. And I don't think it's going to damage their reputation, because I don't think Nintendo's reputation can be damaged at this stage. I think there's plenty of things that would have done it by now. But it's definitely not going to do them any favor.
No.
They're in a position
But-
where they need as many people buying as they can get, and this is not going to do anything for them.
Mm.
Wasn't it only recently in Animal Crossing that men can wear all kinds of clothes and that, and there's no argument made? So when this came out, it just kind of felt like a bit of a U-turn when they were doing so well.
Mm. It was
Yeah.
kind of just like like ultimately I think like when I was reading through it, it just kind of felt really, really, really spineless by them. Like it kind of like they had an opportunity to, because it was presented as their doorstep. I do believe that they never meant to make a political statement, but a political
Yeah.
statement had presented
Yeah,
itself at their
they
doorstep.
unintentionally found themselves in one.
That's the thing, and it was just so spineless because whether or not they meant to, they have turned to people who want inclusion and just want like who care for other people, who care for other people's happiness. They've turned to like anyone who cares for other people's happiness or whatever, and gone, no, we don't really care for your opinion. And then
Yeah,
they've
they've-
turned to like the regressive bigots basically and been like, but you guys,
Yeah,
we want to
save
keep
money.
you happy,
Well,
Definitely alienated a lot of the fan base. Like,
just
That's
just
because-
just to point out, Nintendo have I don't know if you guys saw the update, but Nintendo did actually end up apologizing, and have said that they I will just state it just for the fairness. They did state that they will go back, and Nintendo are all about inclusion, are all about equality, and that going forward, that is something that they will take on board. But speaking as a gay gamer, it's too little, too late. For me personally, I mean, I was solely going to go out and pick up the Wii U for the next installment of Smash Brothers,
Oh yeah, like
based purely on that game.
I was going to get it for the new Mario Kart, like, because at the end of the day, like, a lot of us as gamers, even though like it is the same game as every console, like we do kind of like a lot of us have at least that one Nintendo title that when the installment was released on the console, you want to buy it and play it again because they're always good. They're always some level of enjoyment. And but that's the thing. Now it's like I don't want to anymore. I barely feel like turning on my Wii. I barely feel good doing it anymore. Like it's just kind of one of those things. They have stained their like just their overall opinion amongst gamers a bit. I think like.
Well, it's for me. It was more a case of like I didn't expect Miyamoto to show up at the next San Francisco Pride swinging a rainbow flag back and forth. That's not what gay people were asking, like gay gamers were asking for. It was
It's
literally
for now.
the same thing that every other gamer gets to have.
yeah,
That was it. We weren't asking for, actually, could you just make a gay game for gay people about being gay? It was literally, look, my best friend can marry his girlfriend's me. My boyfriend plays the game. I want to be able to marry my boyfriend's me and freak the crap out of him. You know what I mean? That was it. It wasn't, we want you to stand, shoulder to shoulder at the next, march for
Yeah.
marriage. It was nothing
we want
like
to
that.
be included.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we play your games. We are your customers. We are your fans. We want in.
You said it yourself in the article. Your friends, your drama, your life.
Yeah, and it was, well, actually, yes, but let's change it to suit us. Like, it's just
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a
And the
hashtag
game-
right there. There's a hashtag right there. We want in, as in we.
yeah, actually,
Yeah.
W-I-E,
want in.
W-I-I. That's perfect.
Let's get on that.
Yeah,
Let's
let's do it. We want in.
But it's about inclusion. It's not about this is the whole thing. It's people coming down to, it's equal rights, and all that. I literally just want the same thing as everybody else. It's not about I want to be treated better. I want more. I literally want the same thing as the next person. I don't want any less. I don't want any more. And I think any decent human being, gay, straight, bisexual, whatever, that's literally what everybody wants. And this is kind of why we're talking about it, because a lot of the comments and I know before we started recording, we were kind of talking about the comment section.
Ooh.
They're all comment section of any outlet generally tends to get pretty heated and not exactly stewing with intelligent bites. It's just crap gets thrown back and forth. We're all on YouTube. We all read comment sections.
There's a YouTube guy I know named Brady Harron. He oversees a bunch of channels, but he's very popular. But he actually has to dedicate hours in his work life to moderating comment sections. Like, he now has it that he improves all the comments literally because he films in I'm not sure if he's South African or Australian, but either way there's a lot of like a South African and Australian accents, and there was just a lot of racism in the comments, and it's come down to the point where he has to like dedicate hours of his workday to just making sure that people aren't getting shit ripped out of them for absolutely nothing, just because someone
where
feels
they were born.
Yeah, exactly. Just because someone feels like sounding off because they've nothing else better to do with their time,
To be fair now, the Australian accent is really annoying.
Ah.
Oh, good lord.
Like, I probably would complain about it if it was like on YouTube about something I wanted to watch. I'd probably be like, "Oh Jesus, get someone else, will you?" Jesus.
Christ. And those emails can be directed to andy@thearcade.ie.
You have to pick on the Australians. They're like the most lethal country in the world, and you pick on the Australians.
What are they going to do? They're so far away, and half of them are Irish now anyway. No, I like Australian stuff. It's a joke. It was only a joke. I'm only poking a little bit of fun at the country that gave us. What did it give us?
Fosters.
Frosters.
Koala bears.
Yeah.
Koala bears. Yeah, koala bears. All right. Yeah.
Kylie Minogue.
Kylie Minogue. Okay, okay. You know what? I take it back.
Wolverine. Hugh Jackman. Just.
Yeah.
Don't forget that.
I took it back. All right. Jeez.
Just saying, you don't want Wolverine knocking at your door.
No,
well,
I don't.
It'll be Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. In which case, you probably do want him knocking at your door.
Absolutely.
Maybe you do.
That'd be a serious exclusive for the site. Hey, Hugh. Andy was saying shit about you. Wanna come over and sort him out?
Andy Kavanagh, trash talk Hugh Jackman. What you did next will leave you shocked.
Like
Entertainment would be all over that shit, man.
But isn't it about time for that headline trend to die? By the way, like,
is
that not
absolutely what they did next? Stop.
But like, I'm not just saying it in terms of like I want it to die, but like, surely in terms of how long internet trends generally last now, that's done. Why isn't it gone yet?
Totally exceeded. It's one of those scroll headlines you see. It's like, oh no, sorry, gone.
Yeah, I don't even pay attention to it anymore. I'm like, yeah, whatever.
It's not gone because sites like BuzzFeed have latched onto it now, and you have people who spend all day on Facebook just sitting there looking at BuzzFeed articles about what that old man did next and how shocking it was.
Is that not?
Has anyone ever actually been amazed? That's what I would like to know.
No.
I'm
underwhelmed.
I'm actually guilty of. We're getting kind of off the topic. I'm actually guilty of that. Today I clicked. Someone shared best man gives world's greatest speech, and what you're about to see will shock you, and make your day.
That's been around a while, I think.
And I clicked it, and it was the bride's. The bride had a best man. I think that it was the bride's best man or her chief bridesman, something along those lines. Anyway, but they were sitting down, they were giving their speeches, and it was basically him talking about her and how their lives have intertwined so much over the last. It was really nice at the start, and then it went. And part of our journey has been with Britney Spears, and how we could name certain moments of our life to a Britney Spears track or a Britney Spears.
A dark turn. And
you were just like, right, okay, clearly they both are really passionate about Britney Spears. And then, he went on to thank the groom and to say that how he was so happy that she found someone so deserving of him and that she has to keep him. And to keep him, she better, and it was like, work, bitch. And everyone was like, yay! And all of a sudden, he burst into a Britney Spears dance routine with like 8 backup dancers. And my immediate reaction wasn't, oh my god, that's so cool. My immediate reaction was, if I was that fucking bride, I would have cut his face. Yeah. Like, he just fucking upstaged me on my wedding day.
Bridezilla.
Absolutely. I would have pounced and started scratching. Like, that's just I don't know if I was the only person who was watching Upworthy that was their initial reaction.
So today we learned that Upworthy articles make Declan want to cut people's faces.
Just people who
That's
upstage
probably
him.
the biggest reaction I get from anybody now.
And no, it doesn't even have to be us who upstage him. If we upstage anyone else, Declan also wants to cut our face. Just
yeah, that's
vicariously.
A silent guardian. A watchful protector.
with a pocket knife.
Anyway,
Just adhering to the Limerick stereotype. But yeah, so the reason we started talking about this was because, and we were talking about comments and stuff like that a second ago, before we got widely sidetracked. But I was reading the comment section on the miiquality Facebook page, and I know that's not something you kind of you kind of get what you're asking for, but most of the comments were from people kind of going, "It's just a video game. Why does it matter?" And, these are people that were like, I don't have an issue with gay people, but it's a video game. You don't have to see that in a video game all the time. Or if you want to play a gay game, go buy it, make a gay game and stuff like that. And that's what really got to me more than anything else. It wasn't. I mean, yeah, what Nintendo did was pretty crap, but it was this attitude afterwards.
Video games as a commodity you could take or leave, kind of thing.
Yeah. It was
It's a
like
fundamental problem with that argument that it's just video games, and it's because it's incredibly hypocritical in terms of where it comes from, because you'll have in mainstream media, particularly in Ireland, it's happened a few times, that you have people who aren't particularly knowledgeable on video games who are overreacting to them and saying that video games are causing the decline in our children and whatever, and making our children obese and making them violent and stuff. And that argument is trotted out for that too. People say, "Oh, they're only video games. Why are you getting so worked up about them?" But then when these 20-something, I'm assuming 20-something, I'm making generalizations. When these 20-something kind of keyboard warriors are asked why they are playing with toys, because that's how these people who make these assumptions viewed video games, they're very quick to kind of point out they're not just toys, that they're not just amusement, that they are something more. So I don't think you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't say on the one hand that these need to be taken seriously because they're not just played by children, and then just turn that off whenever it suits you and say, okay, well, you're gonna call me out on the fact that video games are violent. I'm just going to say they're toys, and you're overreacting. You can't do that. Like if someone is having a discussion about whether or not video games cause violence, let's have that discussion. If someone is saying that, even if we disagree with it, even if someone says that a political statement like marriage equality has no place in a video game, let's have the discussion. Let's open it up. Let's not just disregard it by saying, "Oh, it's only a game. Why do you care?" If you really hold that view, you should have no problem defending that view, and you should be called to task to defend that view. And I think that it's really important, if video games are going to be taken seriously, which they are. I mean, the very fact that we're having this podcast proves that we're moving very quickly along that path.
Well, there's an entire strain of, in the last 15 years, there's been an entire strain of actual validated journalism. You can actually be an actual journalist who spends their time solely on video games. And I mean, I think that in itself, like people who take it seriously and write about it seriously and provide news, coverage, and opinion on it seriously, like once that happens, that's where something shifts from being a commodity to a very serious media entity, and that should be taken seriously.
Sure, Journey won 5 BAFTA awards, one of them for artistic achievement. So I mean, that alone, whether you agree with it or not, it's winning the awards.
And you have people like Telltale and David Cage taking games beyond being games, almost.
Yeah,
like
more of a social interaction.
Media, they're merging them with other forms of storytelling.
Yeah, exactly. And to be fair to the BAFTAs were way ahead of the curve on this one. They brought video games in as as a pillar of their kind of award ceremony way back. I think it was like 2000.
They gave their own glamorous ceremony like this year, and there was actually a bit of like, there was a proper feeling of like, this is, if you win this, it's a proper award. It's not just kind of like a certificate and like, oh look, the video game won an award. If you win it, there's a proper bit. There's a proper bit of credence to it, and a bit of like,
It's not a Spike video game award. It's
exactly.
It's a BAFTA. It actually means something. Yeah.
But
actually, just on another point with Andy, when you were saying about how people don't take people saying that, like, oh, video games shouldn't be taken seriously. The thing is with that is that I find that I would put safe money that a big crossover between that are the same people who will go out and buy FIFA every year. And if
Oh, or
games
Call of Duty.
matter that much, then why do you need to spend 60 quid just to get a bunch of statistic updates in a video game?
Yeah, yeah.
There's kind of like because they may not realize it, but they are putting weight on the idea of the game being totally up to date and them playing their game in real time with the season that they're following, and that in itself is making the game more serious than just a game.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the same as well with the people who will come out and shout about how video games are violent and they're kind of ruining society and all this. Those are the very first people who will be in line for Christmas to buy their kid the new Grand Theft Auto game.
Oh, this is it,
Even
and
though he's like 7.
they'll buy it
Like,
and be
oh,
like, oh, you know, it's the only game.
It's like, oh, but you know he's not old enough to play that. Ah, yeah, but he really wants it.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's the only game he wants. I don't have a clue about them. You know, it just keeps him quiet and like on Christmas Day for a few hours and stuff. And they're kind of sitting there going, look, there is the reason why these PEGI ratings have now been put onto video games is because to try and curb this idea. Because realistically, I don't think anyone is going to jump at the idea of a 5-year-old playing Grand Theft Auto. But like,
hope not.
It's a try and curve that idea of like, we're trying to help you help the market.
You give out about this spotted, so help us.
Exactly.
But I think, I mean, those are all fair points. But, and I mean, I don't. For the record, I don't actually disagree with anything that anyone has said. But I think, and I hope we'd all be kind of willing to recognize the fact that the four of us, and in general the gamer community, will be kind of biased in terms of, video games as art. I mean,
we're not.
I think
we're people who grew up with video games. I think if you were someone who hadn't,
if you were brought in new to it,
perhaps grew up in a household where video games were maybe disallowed or for whatever reason, or you didn't have access to them, I think you would have a different opinion, because at the end of the day, we did grow up with them. So not only is there kind of like our lives now based around video games, but there's also a lot of credence to us having nostalgia and emotional connection with video games from a very early age, you know, and them being a part of our life and something that we have sought refuge in for various reasons, you know. Like, I think there is definitely like a certain level of kind of like, well, of course we take it seriously because, you know, we've been taking it seriously for a long time.
Just to play devil's advocate on that point, and I completely agree with you, Anto, by the way, but just for the sake of kind of getting all the other arguments out there, I know a lot of people who have been playing games just as long as I have and kind of are just as obsessive about it as I am, who don't believe that there's anything kind of artistic or any artistic merit in games as a medium, and don't believe that there has to be. That they just don't think it's important. They think that it's just an amusement. It's something that amuses them, keeps them happy. It's just fun. And you know, that's another argument altogether.
But that's the thing. I think
is there.
I think
even
for all media types as well. I think that exists for all media types as well. Like, because like taking it outside of video games, like when it comes to anything from books to films to music, I know people who are just as passionate about these things as I am, and just take it just as seriously. But they definitely don't put them to the level of kind of, you know, they don't hold it to the kind of intellectual level that.
They wouldn't have the same scrutiny to it, like.
Exactly. And I mean, I think at the end of the day, you know, kind of, you know, meaning on these things is imposed to a certain extent. You know, like, meaning is there to be taken, and you can add to it if you want, or you can just sit there and experience it and be like, all right, well, that was grand. I must have a cup of tea and read the newspaper. Like, you know, there is, But when something like this comes up with Tomodachi Life, it throws that idea into debate. You know, it throws it into serious debate because
whether they meant to or not, they've put it there now to the point where we are talking about it like this.
That's the thing. An accidental or otherwise political statement is still a political statement, and once you throw that out there, you know, socio-politically, it's going to throw everyone's values up. And it does come down to a sense of like, do you want to take it seriously? Do you not? You know, and I think that like if you're not taking it seriously, there's an element of kind of, you know, bystander apathy going on as well when it comes to this.
Really. That is it at the end of the day. Yeah, it's apathetic. It's kind of, this argument isn't relevant to me, so I'm just not going to allow it to continue. You know, I would say that a lot of people that are
and that's the thing as well. I think a lot of people that are saying, "Oh, it's just a game." They're people that it's not affecting. They're not people who are gay or maybe have gay friends, and they're not people who like can see a real time difference in
Yes.
the who did like, which it's fair enough. But as I say, I would just be like, all you have to say to them is that, but that's fair enough. But you have to.
Technically, it shouldn't matter to you one way or the other. Then, if it's just a game, you can take or leave. But it's the
That's
people who are so passionate about shouting it down and saying, "No, it's not art."
Like
Exactly.
Declan was saying earlier, and this is kind of what it all goes back to with Tomodachi Life. And I don't think we're going to spend the whole thing talking about Tomodachi Life, but the crux of the argument really kind of falls back on this idea that people are saying, "Oh, I don't want to see that in a game." That was one of the quotes, Declan, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
want to see that in a game. But the miiquality thing is to include the option.
Yeah,
That's
they're not bullying you into it.
So if you don't want to see it, you
made
don't
the
have to see
that
it.
about inclusion, not changing. It's not changing the game. It's including an option in the game. They're
And
not
you can play the game as you would have anyway.
exactly.
Well,
You know,
supposedly, maybe.
I don't know. I don't know how many of you, or if any of you guys play Guild Wars 2. But I picked it up and I hand on heart. Me and MMORPGs have this really difficult relationship. I have the attention span of a 6-year-old. I start off and then, I play for a week and then all of a sudden I start off as a mage and then I see somebody who is playing, a thief and I suddenly want to be a thief. So I delete my mage character and I go build a thief character. And then somebody has a warrior and I want to be that warrior. But I picked up Guild Wars 2 purely because I'm going to say the artwork and the music and stuff sold it for me, and it did. But it was only when I was playing my first playthrough, and I'll never forget it. And I've played Dragon Age and Dragon Age 2. I've played the Mass Effect games. I've played Gone Home. I'm not a stranger to LGBT themes and LGBT characters. It's something I'm really interested in. I'm really passionate about. But I was playing Guild Wars 2, and it was my very first playthrough. And there's a character now. She's a member of the Sylvari race, which they're plant-based people. You spend kind of the first few basic missions working with her. She guides you through the world, and as it goes on, you kind of realize she has shut herself down, and she's not as the Sylvari are generally a very empathic race, and they're really open to new ideas and new people. But she seems really closed off, and you don't understand why. I mean, she's meant to be kind of teaching you and guiding you, and then just as you kind of reach the next stage of gameplay or the next stage of exploring the world, it basically turns out that Keith was burned by a lover, a woman, like a female Sylvari, and it's just there. It's not. I am a lesbian.
Yeah, there's no bold statement or
it's
declaration.
not. There's no this. By the way, I am a gay, and this is my ex-lover. It was
Deal with
literally. It's literally. It's kind of a thing of you're getting tidbits fed to you every now and again, and you're like, all right, okay. You don't really draw anything, and then it kind of you find out that like Kate basically had her heart broken and was betrayed by her lover Fowlin, and that's it. There's no go off and beat the crap out of the bad lesbian plant or anything. It's just that's it. And for me to play that and be surrounded by a couple of thousand other people who are playing the same race and experiencing something similar, and it's not this big deal. It's not this, there's an option to have gay sex in it, or there's an option to see two guys get in a relationship and maybe kiss with a weird fade in fade out black. You know what I mean? It was just
the world didn't.
that
When they
that
made the
is
game,
what
they made it so the world didn't take it seriously.
That's it.
Like the
It's
world
my
wasn't
life.
making a sing song about it.
Exactly. It was normal to me. You know what I mean? It was perfectly normal to me. There was no kind of, oh my god, that was shocking, or oh, I didn't see that coming, or oh wow, that completely blew my mind. It was literally, and I had this kind of quiet sense of, I suppose, not satisfaction, but it for that moment, when you kind of go, oh, my lover fell and she betrayed me, you're like, oh, all right, okay, wow, and you just go on, and there was no kind of like, oh, let's get up in arms,
no big ham-fisted movie reference or anything like that. It's just
no, it was just
forced
this
in.
is
It was just nicely folded into the story,
and that's what that's what people want.
Yeah,
well,
no, that's like I like anyone looking for the option, and because like, even in like going back to Tomodachi Life, like it's kind of, and imagine the weddings part of it is probably very ridiculous, much like the rest of the game is, and probably isn't. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like it doesn't need to be a big sing song about it. It doesn't need to be. No one's saying like the option has to be there and it has to be this and it has to be that. All people are saying is that if I go up with a male, if I'm playing as a male and I go up with a male character and I actually get married, can I say yes and then have the same ceremony? That's all that's being asked. And I'm going back to when you were saying about Guild Wars 2. I had very much the same reaction when it was Caden that I had.
I think we've lost Anto.
Oh no!
Uh-oh. Anto.
Yeah, no.
Don't worry, he's gonna rise Phoenix any second.
Purely because it was 4 or 5.
Oh, he literally he just kept going.
And he has no clue why we're talking over him now.
Rise like a phoenix.
Thank you, Austria.
You're welcome.
I'm not sure what the situation is with Anto. He might come back in. It'd be really funny if he comes back in like mid-rant again. Yeah.
In the middle of a heated debate, and that is why.
And that's why we should.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you
yes.
Can hear you now. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Good.
Could you hear us the entire time?
Yeah.
Oh God.
Shit. Oh, you're fucked, Andy. You're fucked. You heard it all.
What?
What was the last thing that was heard from me?
Rise like a phoenix from.
It's a very serious debate. In case anyone listening doesn't understand that.
Yeah, phoenixes. Way.
The last thing I heard was Caden.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's what you cut out.
For me, it was Caden, but in Mass Effect, no matter what way you go through the conversations and relationships, you will end up with in Mass Effect 3 in particular, you'll end up with about 4 or 5 character options for relationships to pursue, and one of them will be a character of the same sex trying it on with you. And I remember when the option came up, I was sitting there, and it was a sense of like, wow, and I felt kind of bad for feeling like wow about it, because it shouldn't be an issue, but the fact that the game included it and didn't make a song and dance about it, it was the exact same kind of conversation you would have with any of the other romantic options. It just felt really like this is all anyone's ever asked for. It's just them to include the option and put it there and not highlight it. Just be like, there. If you want to pursue it, you can. If you don't. The game makes no difference either way. You know.
I don't want this entire thing to be, discussing. I mean, I could devote a series of podcasts to LGBT within gaming, but let's try to open it up back to kind of video games as art and video games as a medium for social change. And I think if we get down to it, I think in fairness, all 4 of us would say that video game not all video games are art, but video games.
No, there is definitely art within the medium.
Yeah, all video games are artistic, but not all video
necessarily
games.
To the highest scrutiny. Like
yeah,
like something like Call of Duty Ghosts. I wouldn't regard that as artistic in inverted commas as I would something like Journey or Mirror's Edge.
No.
In terms of like overall package and execution,
You could probably argue the artistic merits of.
It's tough to make a game.
But I think it's kind of a little bit, maybe, what's the word I'm looking for? I think all games are artistic products. Like, I think they all are works of art, whether or not I agree with their
that's exactly the
expressions or statements.
Yeah.
But I definitely think that even Call of Duty, which I have zero interest in whatsoever, even Super Mario Brothers, going right back to the NES thing. I mean, why isn't that a work of art? I think it is. It's the collective artistic endeavors of a whole bunch of artists. I definitely think that all games as standalone products can stand as works of art. It just then depends on whether or not the individuals find the artistic merits within them and agree with them. But I think all games are art, really.
Yeah.
Like in terms of what art is in a very objective sphere.
Yeah,
I definitely think
very kind of like in the idea of expressing something. like, or
Yeah.
and the idea of expressing something, and the idea of being a combined expression of ability and kind of meaning, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
But what I was saying by like artistic and inverted commas is the sense that, like, in terms of lasting impressions, and for me that's a long way towards what I would define as, like, very, like, the more artistic something is, I find, the more lasting impression it leaves me with, the more
Exactly. Like you can
afterwards I
play Journey
think
5 different times and come away from it 5 different times with different interpretations.
this is it.
Whereas
Like, I,
with a
if I,
game like COD, it's like I shot those guys. Did you? Yep.
and I mean, there is a game can be mechanically sound and still do that. Like Mirror's Edge, as we were saying before this started, that, like, the story isn't the best, but the game is so mechanically sound and so different in
Uh,
how
it,
it presents itself, that by the end of
when
it,
it starts flowing, it's beautiful. Like
that's the thing, you know. And by the time you finish the game, I remember when I finished it, I was like, I just want to go back in and try and do everything smoother than I did it the first time. And because the game is so mechanically lends itself so well to that, it
Mm.
you know it allows you to do it leaves lasting impression, not because of the story or its meaning, but more so because of how well made it is.
Yeah,
Um,
there's artistic merit in everything. I mean, you can that's kind of the art in the performance, isn't it? It's like
yeah.
I want to perform better in this game so I can see the expression of this artistic idea at its fullest.
Oh yeah,
Um,
and in like music, like say, if you don't listen, a lot of people don't listen to jazz, but I can guarantee if you watch a good jazz player live, you are going to be completely enthralled in what he or she is doing, because
yeah,
it's a very, very technical area. You just mightn't dig it outside of knowing exactly what you're looking at, if you get me.
I've heard
yeah,
the same thing actually said about death metal. Believe it or not, you might not like it, but it's very precise. Very a lot of precision involved in the drumming and stuff like that.
That
This is
depends.
coming from me. I know nothing to do with drumming, so
Depends entirely on the band you're talking about. But yeah, no,
well, true. Blah, vague statement there, but
no,
But I
like,
think no,
I
like
think, yeah.
for me, art, like I like art is something that, and we are using art as the as a broad term here. Art is something that has an impact on the person who is engaging with the piece, um, either as either as a community or as an individual. Um, it's how you engage with it and how it affects you and how you interpret it. Um, and to kind of go back to what Andy was kind of saying, like, we might not appreciate Call of Duty, um, but there are people who would say the exact opposite of what you said about Mirror's Edge, or who would take what you said about Mirror's Edge and apply it directly to the latest Call of Duty.
Oh yeah, sure they would.
yeah,
Um, I mean, I can. We could, all four of us could pick up a book right now, the same book, and each come away with it feeling completely different. I mean, we
yeah,
might have a shared experience. We might feel the same way about the villain, or we might all kind of had that same rush when the hero or heroine stood up. But at the end of the day, all four of us will come away with a very different experience, with a very different impact, and if you apply that, like that kind of interpretation or that definition of art, and you apply that to video games,
mm.
then video games are art.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
absolutely.
Because I've like, I've come away from reading a book and felt absolutely uh, emotionally devastated.
Oh yeah.
And I'm
Mm.
not saying, oh, my favorite character died in it, or anything like that. Like I remember reading the Age of Five series from Trudy Kavanagh, Trudy Canavan, Trudy Canavan,
You got
and
me on the brain there, Declan.
yeah, uh, uh, hilarious, um,
I
and just a particular scene had this. It was absolutely brutal, uh, in terms of what happened to the characters, um, but I remember speaking to somebody else about it, who was also as much of a big Canavan fan as I am, and they were just, it was very much a case of, oh, um, it was grand. It didn't, it happened, and that was it. and I couldn't get over the fact that this, it was a sexual assault on a character, and I was completely shocked by it. Um, and then the other person was completely unaffected. And I'm not just talking about the fact that it was a sexual assault, but it was the way it was described and those feelings. But then I feel the same way then with a certain. That's like I think The Walking Dead, is it episode 2? Is that the farm?
Yeah.
Oh,
Season 1, episode 2, isn't that the further
yeah.
on? It is. For me, I think it's season 1 as well and truly passed. So I don't. If anybody hasn't seen it yet, you may want to skip ahead, or hasn't played it yet, you may want to skip ahead. But the reveal there about the people on the farm, I like. I was disturbed, and I mean, certain events take place in the barn, and you had to make a decision. And I remember being like, "All right," because I think I was speaking to you about it, Anto, about with Kenny in the barn.
Oh yeah, well yeah. I don't think we spoke directly about it, but kind of yeah, because like that game is so like, like after episode one is kind of the only safe, like part one of episode one is like, or the first season, or part one of the first season, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
is like so
You generally end up at the same result, but just through
that's the
different
thing.
avenues.
But then after that, like you just the decisions you have to make are like they really weigh on you. And actually, just echoing on your point about like us coming away from a book with like different opinions, we've all read the same story. The Walking Dead adds a lot of credence to the idea that like we're experiencing the same world, but we are experiencing in could be vastly different ways depending on the decisions each of us make, which is just kind of like incredible when it comes to discussing something like The Walking Dead, the Telltale series, because you're kind of
Oh,
sitting there thinking, you know, we could all now have a long discussion about season 1 and season 2, and the stories that we come out with could be vastly different to each other because of how that game is built and how it draws
because
you
of how you choose to interpret it as you play it, like.
exactly like how you chose to read the situations and act on that. And it's very, but yeah, the bit you're talking about is I'm going to try and be spoiler free, but it is very there's no real easy way out, but then by the end of it you still feel bloody
Oh yeah,
dirty.
you'll be hard done by either way, but it's just
Yeah.
how do you feel hard done by?
Yeah.
Pretty much. I mean, I had the same conversation, Andy, with Lauren not long ago when I started playing it. It was like, oh, did you do that thing for that guy? No, that guy was a jerk. Screw him. But Lauren, you don't have to. I was like, but it's the right thing to do. So I didn't, and it was just like, what the hell?
And then you kind of end up just sitting there being like, not sure if I like this person the same way anymore.
Yeah,
You know, because you're kind of sitting there being like, hey, let that person die, even though they
it's
are,
like,
you know.
it's like, what if
But
that was me, Lar?
what if?
Clearly you'd be dead now.
Yeah, lesson learned.
But I mean, you come away, like I came away from The Walking Dead season 1 completely and totally moved by that experience. Those 5 episodes. Uh, and then meeting up with people who played it and discussing, not just discussing the events of the game. You know, we weren't just going, oh, and then this part happened, and then this part happened. It was how you came to that point, and then you know how like it was more. It wasn't just playing a game. It was interacting.
Yeah, completely
It,
immersed.
yeah, it was
Feeling out
it was
your
the
surroundings.
experience of being a part of that, even if it was only for 5 short episodes. It we all kind of, you know, like I said, we all shared an experience, but we all came away from it feeling different things, and not just because we chose, you know, different paths or different options. It you know you wind up somewhat at the same point anyway, like we all said. Um, but it was just, I mean, we could all look at a piece of art and kind of go, oh, right, it's a donkey beside the seaside. But if
What's
you're
it
asked,
trying to say?
yeah, you know, if you're asked to interpret that donkey by the seaside, 4 of us might come up with completely different things. So if we can, you know what I mean, if we can play something and all come away with a different idea or a different feeling,
The
from a
narrative
game.
is slightly different, so it means our interpretations can be even more wildly, varied in how, and some of us could feel like hard done, and I imagine there are people out there who feel that like they were very hard done by the game, if you get me, like they were like, oh, the game completely screwed me over or whatever, and it's kind of like that thing where the game, like, it's one of the few games I can think of that really, like, the spectrum of how you can come away feeling from that game is as
it's very
varied as you want.
varied.
Yeah, because
I
of
mean,
how the game delivers itself.
Andy and I had the same kind of experience with Assassin's Creed. Remember when Assassin's Creed 2 came out? We were absolutely dying to play this game, and we had a mutual friend who bought it first, and we let him play ahead, and we watched. And he had no interest in doing the story or delving anywhere into the immersion of the game. It was just deadly. You can punch people. It's like, do play the story.
That was
And
frustrating to watch.
oh no, we ended up just leaving. But it was just like, come on, man, let's get into the story. Let's find out what's going on in the world. It was just like, why? Don't have to.
That's odd. I can imagine someone doing that for like the Grand Theft Auto games, because like that's a lot of the reason why I play the Grand Theft Auto games. But I don't know, Assassin's Creed has always grabbed me as has a narrative, a narrative you actually do want to explore. But
even again, there's more depth and level beyond the narrative, because you can play through the narrative and get to the ending and call it quits there, or you can keep going and playing this whole other level and like collecting the truth and things like that in the game, and it'll totally change your perspective on the game. Like, it got to a point where me and Andy became obsessed with it for a while, and I had another mutual friend who played it, finished it, and didn't get it. I was just like, I don't get what you see in this. Just like, you haven't played this part of it, have you?
2 is definitely Assassin's Creed 2 is kind of me and SoC have had this out a few times now, but I'm on record as everyone knows I'm a massive Creed fan. I've got a tattoo and everything, but I didn't like the first game at all. I really thought it was a misstep. So the second game was a big deal for me because it not only was it amazing, it rectified everything I didn't like about the first one. But in terms of its artistic merit, which is kind of what we're talking about, for 2 for me, it's and a lot of people don't really realize this about it, but as far as I'm concerned, it's a benchmark for narrative in game.
Absolutely, I agree. Like, 2 is like an ocean of depth compared to the little drop that 1 was. 1 was good, I think, but it wasn't near 2.
It's not because the story is particularly fantastic, even though it is pretty good. It's not the quality of the story. It's the way that it's told and the way that it's not told, which is more a kind of a slightly more crucial argument here, because it's got the typical kind of solo campaign that you can breeze through and you can play the game and finish it and get to the thing, and then what SoC was touching on there's a thing in 2 called the truth, which is an extra additional piece that you can find, and it gives you like a very short video. If you do complete the task, it gives you a very short video.
Isn't that the thing where like there's a bunch of riddles, and then when they all link up, they all show you a video that kind of like it tells you about the world you're in, more or less, or more about the premise.
Yeah, it sheds more light on
themselves. This is where it really shines, because the puzzles themselves tell the story. While you're solving the puzzles, you're finding out about the ways in which the Assassin's Creed lore has been woven into the real world history, and it doesn't actually tell you anything. It just kind of implies things, and it coaxes you into putting the dots together yourself. And
so the more of them you collect, the more pieces you can assemble together in your own head without being told, and say, I think this happened because of this.
Yeah, but
not to give anything away.
It's all completely optional, and it's something that most people could totally breeze past. So when I finished Assassin's Creed 2, and I did all the extra stuff as well, I left really, really profoundly affected, going, that is a method of storytelling that no other medium can do. It's something that only a game could do, to give you the pieces of the puzzle and then say, okay, well, you can put it together this way, or if you take the time and explore this world a little more, you can put it together in a much more detailed, much more interesting way. But it's totally up to you. There's no right or wrong way to do this. So it's actually a really, really impressive game narratively that I think a lot of people don't understand just how impressive it is. Not that they don't get it. There's nothing really to get. If you actually play the extra content, it's blatantly obvious what's happening. But so it's not a matter of, oh, you're not smart enough to get it. It's just that most people didn't bother. They kind of missed it. They walked right by it.
It wasn't required.
Yeah, exactly. So
just a game that does that as well, but I think does it more directly, is BioShock, with the audio logs. Like, it's the same basic idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, you can just run through the game if you want, and you're going to get a decent basic story, especially in BioShock. I would argue BioShock 1 more so than BioShock Infinite. You're getting like without the audio recordings, you are getting a more kind of complete story. I'm not sure if Bioshock Infinite makes a whole lot of sense if you don't got the vocoders, but that's another point. But yeah, like yeah, but Bioshock One, like if you get the like you will get a decent story and it'll make sense and it'll be all well and good. But if you get all those audio logs, you get drawn into a much deeper world and a much darker kind of sense of why you're there, what's going on, and what happened before you got there, and it gives like not only does it like advance the world, but it kind of gives you such a greater sense of immersion and depth into it, and it makes you feel more profound at the end of it. But Bioshock was much more like, while they were still optional, it definitely spoon-fed the player more of them. Like it kind of it puts them directly in your path in such a way that like it entices you to complete it. Whereas Assassin's Creed is frankly just doesn't do that. Like it's kind of very much like, this is entirely optional. We're not even going to give you any, just as a tidbit to get you started. If you want to start. If you don't. It's all, but like it'll always be completely optional to do them or not. You know,
exactly.
And that in itself is kind of like it's a different way of approaching it. But like, as you say, the principle does affect how you walk away from the game. Like I think the Bioshock games are I hold them in much higher esteem because of the greater world that they created, because I took the time to do that. And I'm not sure if my opinion will be as high if I hadn't bothered, if you get me. Like if I just got to the end and was like, oh, it was actually that guy. Right, well, I'll get back to reading the news. So like, you know, it's kind of you know, the effect is a little bit less profound inherently, I think, without doing that kind of extra stuff.
So, we've all kind of agreed. Okay, depending on what your interpretation of art is, we've all agreed that video games are art.
Mm-hmm.
We can agree that video games have an impact on their players.
Yeah, definitely.
Not necessarily. Not everyone. It won't have the same impact on everyone. Like we were kind of just saying there, some people will take more away from it. The more you kind of like a painting, the more engrossed you are, the more you'll take from it.
That'd be where I'd say it is an art form, though, and the fact that it's subjective. You could come away from it and say, "Oh, I got that from it," and you might meet with a creator who says, "Well, that's not at all what I was going for."
Especially if you talk to Hideo Kojima.
Yeah, I was actually
Metal Gear Solid 2. Ah, no, that was a bit of a laugh.
Him and David Cage are hilarious for just kind of like he asks them about their games and they're basically like, "Oh yeah, well, there's meaning, but like you guys got the wrong meaning that I did. I made it because this," and you're kind of like, when you listen to and read interviews with him, you're just kind of sitting there going, I'm not even sure if he knows what he's talking about. He's just stringing words together.
Did he even play his game?
Yeah. What game have you been playing?
Yeah, we all know about the whole. I mean, when it comes, you can't have I suppose you can't have an artistic discussion or a discussion about art, especially storytelling. If you're going to go down that road, without kind of referencing Derrida. He's always kind of the ghost in the room, the death of the author. That when the text is read by someone, the author's intentions are meaningless. It's kind of, it totally becomes up to that person to interpret it, and every text is constantly reinvented. Every time it's read, it's reinvented again. There is nothing but text. And I'm definitely a 100% subscriber to that idea. I know some people kind of sit on the fence about it, and some people really hate it. But I think that is just, I think that's what art is about. I think it's about interpreting. I think it's about taking something and pulling meaning from it. So that's why I get quite annoyed when people say, oh, if someone says someone is reading into something, that doesn't mean that it's not valid. Just because you don't see it there doesn't mean that it's not
back that up.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also like kind of going back to the Tomodachi Life thing when people were saying, oh, it's only a video game, why does it matter? It's like, it matters because it's been brought up. It matters because it's been brought into the room.
Whether or not you thought it mattered before, now we're talking about it, so it does matter.
Exactly. So it matters now. So maybe you didn't think it matters before. Maybe you never would have thought about it. But that doesn't mean it's not valid. And it's the same thing when it comes to interpretations on text or on stories or games or art or whatever. Just because you didn't see it or you never thought of it doesn't mean that it's not there. It doesn't mean that it's not open for someone else to see it.
I think a big bolster to that would be the modern Sherlock series with BBC. Like that brought a lot of attention to stories that are decades and decades old, but on top of that, it also brought a lot of people who, like, those and the core outline of the stories are the same in the episodes as they are in the books, and it brought a lot of people interpreting them and saying things about them that it's kind of like the meaning was always there. You just ignored it because it wasn't
relevant to you at the time.
Exactly, and now that it's brought into modern times, you see it more, like, and that's the thing. And it is that idea of, like, once the idea is presented there, and I will say that there should, I feel there should always be, like, if you're going to say something like with Tomodachi Life, where it's like a bit of a political statement or whatever, which is actually the terminology that Nintendo used. Once you use that terminology, once you bring it in there and there's credence to it, then it's totally valid. I think, like,
you did that to yourself, yeah.
Yeah, like I think for some meanings, I mean, if you were to come out and say something ridiculous like, I don't know, Super Mario is an example of the fascist regime in World War II or something, it's a bit, right, your meaning is valid, but I'm not sure, you're kind of wrong.
Getting applied.
Oh, just because something is valid does not mean that you have to agree with it.
That's the thing, but, like, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I'll defend to the end the idea that everyone's opinions they're allowed to have them, and they're allowed to present them. Yeah. But after that, then it's kind of like, but no one has to agree with them, and you don't have to, like, you're not owed anything by having a validated opinion on something. You're not owed anything by having an opinion. And I think that's where the kind of, and it's the paradox of intolerance then as well. It goes into the whole idea of, like, well, but by being not tolerant of it, you are being intolerant. But like, you can't, because then you just end up swimming in circles about it anyway.
Yeah, it's kind of what's been happening for a while, sadly. But it's the same people who shout about it, then don't want to talk about it when it doesn't suit them. So it's like, well, we can't debate this with you then.
Declan, are you snapping your fingers in, like, kind of a Sonic the Hedgehog "I'm waiting" kind of gesture?
Yeah. No. Move along, bitches.
Something is going.
Oh, and you automatically assume it's me.
What is that?
It's not me.
It's totally not me.
It's probably Anto. He's got crap audio. No, because I did hear it as well. I
had too. I just assumed it was Declan.
Oh, fuck all of you! I'm going to do a new podcast talking about the three of you assholes.
Okay. I don't think we can have a discussion or a podcast or whatever about video games as art and not bring up that game company. And Genova Chen and Kelly Santiago and the team over there. Whether you want to talk about Flow, Flower, or Journey, I mean, it's practically a podcast series in itself.
Austin Wintory as well. Like, I think his soundtracks have, especially for Journey, added a lot of what's the word I'm looking for?
I know exactly what you mean. I can't think of it either.
It added a lot of, just use the word credence, a lot of the credence to the idea of, like, video games being a multimedia merger of several different ways of kind of interweaving media together to form.
Exactly, yeah, I literally just came here into the podcast from a game of Journey. I was playing it while I was waiting on you guys.
Because the music it doesn't tell a different story, but it definitely
works kind of in unison with what you're doing.
That's the thing. If you play that game on mute with other music playing, you are playing a different game to the one that the designers of the game wanted you to play.
Yeah, you're not totally immersed in the game, which you should be.
And they even wanted that, because Austin Wintory, like, he says that when the game was coming out, because the music was such an integral part of it, they decided to bolster the release of the soundtrack to be a month after the game, because he was like, I don't want anything spoiled of the experience, and if you listen to the soundtrack first, you're going to get some of it is going to be spoiled for you, even if it's just track titles or the emotions pervade. Some part of the game is going to be slightly different to you. And so a week after the game was out, someone had ripped the entire thing to YouTube. But he was like, instead of being aggressive towards this, I just decided to say, thanks for taking the time to listen to my music. Most people don't do that for video game soundtracks. But then he found that more people bought the soundtrack, bought the game, and got press for him being positive. And then it was like that relationship between developers and consumers that was very healthy and very based on the idea of, like, if we take our art and take it seriously, and then are nice to people who are, like, only taking certain aspects of it, they will want to take it seriously, and they will want to seek out the full product then, because we're nice people, and they've seen a greater increase in people experiencing the game and not just experiencing the soundtrack then. It's interesting.
Oh, definitely, yeah. He's another integral part of that machine, all right. I suppose like Journey, should we even open that can of worms? Because that's a discussion.
We can't not do it.
What a game! What a thing!
It's a masterpiece. It's an absolute masterpiece. I mean, it's all the elements come together, and
it's just released a limited hard copy. So like, it's kind of like, I love it, and I'm a big kind of, I don't like owning things digitally, and I want to invest in the company and buy something physical off them, but they don't sell anything physical. So I'm kind of like, damn it.
Well, they did release SoC has it. You can get Flow, Flower, and Journey on a disc, like as one collection kind of thing.
It's actually really sweet. It's the collector's edition, and it comes with 3 other minigames plus the soundtrack to export and some concept artwork.
What heroes?
It's pretty sweet.
Even that, when they put it out physically, they're like, yeah, even though you just want the games, here's some extra stuff, because like,
yeah, and it's like a definitive collection. There's so much stuff in it.
Yeah. I don't know anyone I know a lot of people who haven't played Journey, and they've all kind of,
they're kind of skeptical of it.
Yeah, they're not dismissive of it, but they're quite skeptical of the reaction it seems to get out of most people. And the thing I always point back to them is, I said, yeah, I get that reaction a lot from people who haven't played it. I've never once gotten it from someone who has played it.
That's the thing. It is a fire in terms of like, it's one of the very few games that like, when people say like, because when you talk about not liking video games to someone who really likes a video game, 99% of the time you're going to get like, oh, you haven't played it the right way or whatever. Journey is one of the very few games that when people do play it, they all have the same reaction of like, that was an experience, not just a game,
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely.
Yeah. Absolutely. But then, I mean, on top of Journey, I love Journey. It's one of my favorite games ever. But I hold Flower in just as high esteem. I think Flower is a huge artistic achievement for the medium. I wrote an entire dissertation on Flower for my final year in college, and it was just such a joy to explore Vincent Diamante's score for that game, because it was musical scoring on another level, a complete other level, because what you have in Flower is basically, it's not even billed as a music game, but what you have is this incredible improvisation kind of thing, where there's no right or wrong answer. It's kind of the melodies. For anyone who doesn't know, with Flower, you trigger musical notes by blowing into flowers and making each flower individually bloom, and each one triggers one note. And there's kind of a musical bed in the background. And the goal, I suppose, is to make the flowers bloom with a reasonable degree of fluency to kind of trigger a melody that will match with the music bed in the background. But the trick is there that you're using the 6-axis, so your fluency is not going to be great. And if it is, it's going to take a while for you to get to that point. But at no point ever does Flower ever punish you or give you any kind of, like, no, you're doing that wrong, or you're not doing it quick enough, or you're not doing it well enough. Whatever you come out with, that's fine. That's the game. That's the score. That's what you're hearing, and it's totally valid. So
the score kind of it changes because
depending on how you play it.
You're flowing more in a straight line, as you get kind of a greater flow going, your character's your avatar, shall we say, speeds up. But the score is written in such a way that because the score tempo moves up and down with how fast you're going, and the tempo shifts with it, but at no point does it feel like you're listening to a slowed down or sped up version of the score. It's the same notes, and they're done and it's being delivered in such a way that it never feels like you're interrupting the score or not listening to it or feeling it the way it was meant to, which is incredibly I can only imagine the macro management or the micromanagement that he went into in recording that, kind of getting the intonation so perfect that when they sped it up and slowed it down, it didn't affect the frequency at all.
It's a totally interactive score.
That's the thing. That's very difficult to do. In terms of production, I actually can't actively think of anything that has done it that well.
No, yeah, it's definitely a standalone thing as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, because I know it's not billed as a music game, which I think is a little unfair. I think the music is the
but it's not Guitar Hero basically. It's not. It doesn't wear the music on its chest as an integral part. But that's what I like about the company as well, is that when they release a game, they don't sit there and are like, this part is awesome or this part is awesome. They're literally just like, here's a game, go play it and enjoy it. If you don't want to, that's all right. We're not gonna try and do anything more you don't want to do, you know.
But yeah, if I mean Journey, Flower, even Flow. I mean, Flow kind of does a really, really bizarre thing by making an artistic
Flow is
statement.
very
It's
ambiguous
different.
game.
Yeah.
Flow is the strangest of the three. It's the hardest
Oh,
to
absolutely.
get your head around. Like, even in terms of like just knowing what exactly you're doing with the game, it's the hardest.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I'm that
Another
thing.
example.
Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just after getting really good at being that thing. Now I'm something else.
Why is that thing flowing away now? I wanted to stay with that thing.
It's another
Yeah,
example
yeah.
of kind of performance art, isn't it? It's like the artistic kind of expression is in how you play. It's in the performance of the piece. It's like you become something else. You don't even know what's happening. It's kind of the game is unraveling while you're playing it. So
Yeah.
it's you have to begin the experience before you will experience anything. It's quite interesting, I think.
When you
And
put it
it's
that
also
way, it kind of reminds me back again of a friend recently who just got into playing The Last of Us, and it's like, oh yeah, I've just been kind of going guns blazing at it for a while. And I was like, ooh.
I haven't played. I have a copy of The Last of Us here. I'm not playing it until after my exams. So if we could stem that discussion now, so nothing gets spoiled from it. Because I'm actually quite proud of myself. It's been almost a year since the game is out, and I haven't heard a single plot spoiler yet. Which means
Until
that by the
now.
time...
They're all werewolves.
Yeah.
Not actually the last of them at all. There's loads of them.
Yeah. It's a twist.
But actually, one thing I was going to say about the company who made Journey, Flower, and Flow is that they're also taking the idea of a video game very seriously, in the sense that there's no way you can play them and not interact with it, you have to be invested in those games to get something out of it. Whereas I think a lot of
you can't do it passively. It's not like you can pause it for 20 minutes to come back after tea and be like, oh, what was I doing?
I think a lot of people, especially in the latest generation of gaming, where the single player modes have gotten very short. A lot of people just want to sit down, they just want to play a game, be told a story, and then, bugger off to the multiplayer, just not play games anymore, like, or not play that game anymore. And
download the new patch with the dogs.
You're going to invest yourself in this experience. That's fine if you don't want to. If you choose not to, that's totally fine. But if you want to play our game, if you want to get the story we're trying to tell to, if you want to get the expression and feel something because of it, you have to experience it. Like, you have to interact with it, not just sit there and have an experience given to you. Which can be difficult to do, because some games, they try to do that, but they do it in a bit of a ham-fisted way, and you just kind of like, oh, this is like, I think Dark Souls is a little bit guilty of it with the higher difficulty.
Oh yeah, Jesus.
Kind of like, you're going to experience the game how they want you to experience it, but what they end up doing is alienating players who just don't want to be tested that much when playing something.
Moving slightly on to something else, Declan. You read the His Dark Materials books, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you understand what I mean when I say that, like, the ending to that trilogy, the ending to the core storyline of that trilogy, is pretty emotionally devastating.
Yeah.
You know which core storyline I'm referring to, don't you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I know. I don't like talking about His Dark Materials because, well, it's not that I don't like talking about it. It's just I associate those books with this. It's kind of like, do you know the way people say there's a soundtrack to your life?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like that as well, but there's like a bookshelf or a library. And when I was reading His Dark Materials, I was going through a really awkward phase. That kind of, you're old enough to be considered responsible, but you're not old enough to be considered an adult.
Right. Yeah, that 15 to 18 window where you're
you're just like, you're not a kid, but you're not an adult.
You can go out, but you have to give us a call before midnight.
Well, I didn't go out. What the hell are you talking about? You don't know me at all. But I guess, and this kind of goes back to the way I talk what I said earlier on about the impact, but um, reading his dark materials, for anyone who hasn't picked up the books, you're missing out on something.
Big
Oh yeah,
time.
they're so. Not only are they so underrated as a series, apart from outside of people like fantasy readers, but I think Jesus wept. Their film did not do them justice.
No, 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 no.
Not even close. And I'm looking at these like it's like The Hobbit is a book that is I think it's shorter than the first Northern Lights, the first His Dark Materials book, and I'm looking at it going that book gets 3 films and we can't even get a decent
One
smart
film. Yeah.
about these.
I would like to point out though that I did think Nicole Kidman was perfect casting choice for Mrs. Coulter.
Oh, she's
Oh,
perfect.
like,
And so was Daniel Craig as Lord Asriel was perfect.
Yeah.
Like the casting was pretty spot on. It was just
the production was bad. Like,
yeah, everything else about it was just
the pacing of the narrative and even there was artistic merit in how they realized the world. Just the film just fell flat on its face. They just weren't taking it as seriously as they should have been in terms of what the book, like the kind of narrative of the book and the kind of story that was to be told.
They also just kind of lopped off the ending for absolutely no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, I wasn't really sure about that, and I also
as much as I love His Dark Materials, Northern Lights is probably the weakest book in the series as far as I'm concerned, and it's not until you get to that last bit when you realize the twist, when you go, the thing that she was bringing him wasn't that thing, it was the other thing. That's when it goes from this is kind of good to, oh holy god, this has been lying to me the whole time.
Yeah.
And if you reveal that at the end of a film, that's going to be like sequel. You're handed your reason to see the second film. Like the book is handed the filmmaker's reason. Lopping it off basically means you're telling an okay story in a pretty shoddy manner because of how they made the film. It's just and as I say, I don't know why they changed the title either. Like that is something that's kind of a bit beyond me as well. Because I was like,
the Golden Compass.
Yeah, I mean,
that's what it's called in the US.
I know it's cooler to sell it, but like,
it kind of makes. I'm not as a okay. This isn't what we're supposed to be talking about, but really quickly. The Americans change the name of those books all the time. They changed all the Harry Potter books to different names and stuff.
Yeah, but Harry Potter was still released over here as the Philosopher's Stone. That's the thing. Like, it's kind of
yeah, but this was an American production. But the reason that I don't mind so much with the Northern Lights being called Golden Compass is because it's more uniform with the other 2 books. It's the
Amber Spyglass, the Sudden Life, the Amber Spyglass.
Yeah, you're dead right. It's just one of those decisions that I was a bit like, why really? Like, I don't know. It's just kind of I prefer uniformity when things are just over.
I think, Anto, you should write a really strongly worded letter to Philip Pullman.
Why would I do that when I can have a really strongly worded podcast with the arcade?
Well, I'm not saying this to Philip because he won't talk to me then afterwards.
But anyway, right. The point I was originally going to make, right, way back before we started talking about His Dark Materials, was that we were talking earlier about kind of books, which are still even today kind of seen as the most mature kind of option for emotional storytelling, and kind of leaving the reader or leaving with the audience with an emotionally affected kind of. Like films are kind of seen as a more shallow version of that. Like books are kind of the holy grail. It's where everyone kind of goes to say that's
very much. If you say you're an active reader, that is the one sure sign that you may almost guaranteed talking to someone in the pub and like, oh, I'm a reader, they're going to sit there and be like, oh, so you're a nerd, and you're going to be like, look, just because I'm excited about things and I'm not interested in the Premier League does not mean that like. I'm everything you think I am just because you watched an episode of The Big Bang and Sheldon happens to be reading a Dungeons and Dragons book.
Well,
but that's
in terms of the emotional impact of His Dark Materials and the actual kind of the way that it does it and the kind of the point of that core storyline, because obviously His Dark Materials has a huge religious agenda that is not really what I'm getting at here.
Yeah.
The core storyline of that book, when it resolves, and it resolves in such a way that's totally heartbreaking but perfect. It's horrible, but you can't imagine it any other way. It's mirrored almost exactly, beat for beat, including some of the religious elements too, in Final Fantasy X. It's almost exactly the same kind of emotional reaction.
I get what you say, but just like the way when just that sentence did not end how I thought it was going to end.
No, I actually that.
Think about it.
You've actually. I don't want to use the phrase "my mind has been blown," but wow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, right. I mean, like I was depressed like for 2 weeks after I finished Dark Materials, and it was to the point where every time I won't give it away actually in case people
Yeah.
haven't read it, but
Don't.
it did affect the way I
Thank
viewed the
you.
world. And when I finished Final Fantasy X a few years later, it was the exact same reaction. It was no less intense. It was this hugely
Oh,
kind of
Final Fantasy X's cadence is one of the most, I would argue, one of the most perfectly delivered in storytelling in games. And like, I think
yes.
I think it's just such a like the way it builds up what's about to happen and the way it ends and the way because you're watching it and it also drives home the whole thing. There's no other way for this to end. This has
Yeah,
to go
exactly.
the way this is going to go, and
Yeah.
I like. It's just like, and even like when I played through it recently on the PlayStation 2, just because the HD remake was coming out, and like, every time I play it, I'm like, this, there's so much kind of 9/10 of it is just this kind of like, we're going to do it, we're going to defeat sin, and then the ending happens, and you're like, even when you know what's going to happen, it makes it worse because you become aware of how
Yeah.
consciously the game is telling you like, oh, this isn't going to happen, but it is.
Well,
Enjoy.
it's perfect for how it sticks to its guns. It doesn't shy away
Mm.
from the inevitability of the situation, which is exactly what his Dark Materials it does as well. It signposts it the whole way. If you're watching, you can actually see, there's no other way for this to go. This is how it's going to go. But because you can, as you're reading, you want it to go the other way so badly. Subconsciously, I think you choose to ignore those signposts. So when you finally get to the conclusion, you already know you've been told and So it's not a surprise. It's just seeing it happen is horrendous. It's just this. It's fantastic. Like, it's brilliant. I mean, I'm saying using words like horrendous and horrific and horrible, but that's only because that's how they made me feel in my heart and my soul.
Oh
But
yeah, definitely.
it's one of those really cathartic, horrible, horrific moments that, at the end of it, you come out through the tears and through the haze feeling like alive. It's like
Oh
you've
yeah.
experienced something really important. Um, and to anyone who would say that games can't evoke the same kind of emotional responses as, say, books can, one really, really strong argument that I will always point back to is his Dark Materials in Final Fantasy X, because there are a lot of parallels in the storylines. There are a lot of parallels in how the stories are told and in how they unfold. And for the most part, I think most people who have experienced both would agree that there is a huge parallel in how the audience reacts to the stories
Mm.
in each thing. I don't think the fact that one is a game and one is a book does anything to diminish that parallelity,
Mm.
that parallel reaction. I think it's the same either way.
I just adding to that actually, just which it's just related to Final Fantasy is something that I think we all kind of were affected by to different degrees is the ending of Final Fantasy VII Disc 1 when Aerith
Oh
gets
yeah.
killed. I think it's just one of those moments where like it's one of the easiest moments to point to, but I think it's one of them with the most kind of credence because of um how many people have felt the same experience is that felt the same emotional weight of it. Is because when that happens, that was very much, not only is that turning against everything that is still used in modern storytelling, like the whole idea of like the heroes you encounter, none of them are going to die. There'll be ones tagged to die, but the first person you encounter in your journey, they're not going to die. The first love interest, they're not going to die. And then when Final Fantasy VII does it that early, it's very much a case of like, actually, they can, and we can do it, and we can make you invest in it in a video game.
Yeah.
But especially since Final Fantasy VII was the first 3D one, like that's a big statement, not only like historically and contextually, but also like it is still one of those experiences that when you play through for the first, even when you play through it now, it's still very much like I didn't want her to go.
But
Damn.
it's very much as well as being a narrative thing. It's also a really, really interesting thing to point to when you're talking about the kind of games. I suppose what would be games trump card when it comes to other artistic mediums, which is interactivity,
That's
because
yeah. You
like Chrono
talked to
Trigger.
her. You actively built a relationship. You felt like you were the one who actively built a relationship with her. The game,
Yep.
like you experience a book or a film, it's going to give you the relationship. It's going to progress because the creator has or the writer has created it. So with a game, it can give you directly a feeling that built a relationship with this person. You've sought out a relationship with this person, and it was your choice to be as invested as you are when.
Yeah, but even taking it, that's all true, but even taking it outside the narrative and just referring to gameplay, if you look at RPGs kind of leading up to that, particularly the Squaresoft RPGs, there's always this attitude of, like you were saying, the heroes will not die. So if they do die, it's game over and you start again. And you build up these characters, you level them up. It's a role-playing game, so you are responsible for keeping them safe because you decide who is stronger and who is weaker and who blah blah. Whereas with you're always in control. Whereas with Final Fantasy VII, it happened. I think it's really, really important to point out that Aeris' death happened in a cutscene. It was, and that I think has more weight than I think people realize.
It's out of your control. The one place where they control the narrative, they can fully control what you're taking in, is in the cutscenes. Yeah. And
you get to choose how the characters develop. You get to choose what material, what abilities they use. They feed you this illusion of control the entire time, and then they just take it away.
Especially since Final Fantasy VII, the technical limitations worked with it as well because the cutscenes are so rare in that game. 8, 9, 10, all of them since have been more cutscene heavy because they knew how to manage the space on the discs better and had better technology. But Final Fantasy VII is very sparing with cutscenes, so the fact that it's a fully rendered, as good as they could make a cutscene means that they were like, we're going to make this a big point that you are going to feel the full weight of, and you're going to know that we have created this. You are not in full control. You're not as much control as we want you to be. And then even afterwards, the game makes a big point of kind of you're driven by revenge to kill Sephiroth, and it kind of you fall back into that illusion of you're controlling the idea of how strong you want to be when you face Sephiroth, and it's kind of like even though they've told you you're not in control, you still rail against the idea of you still rail against that and play with the idea of being in control in mind, which is really, really interesting. And it's the only thing, considering that was released in 97, is pretty ridiculous. But that is the only, that was one of the major things that only gaming can grant the consumer, in terms of taking in an experience.
How much time do we have left?
Well, I'll just check. Let's see what we're at.
I'd say we're pretty far in.
Oh yeah, God, we're nearly at an hour and a half. Not a bad hour and a half, but
you're gonna have your work cut out for you editing this, boy.
I'll just put it up as it is. It'll be grand. Nobody said anything too racist.
Just down on all that beehive talk from before.
No, we lost that. That's fine.
Damn.
Can I take 1 minute to just mention a game that is very, very close to my heart? I don't think anyone else here has played it, but it's not as lame as a lot of initial kind of surface appearances might suggest. But for me, it's a hugely artistic thing. I actually wrote one of my emotional gaming articles for the Arcadio was about it, which is Katana Shoujo, which is a freeware. It's totally free. It builds itself as a kind of visual novel dating sim thing, and that is ostensibly what it is. But it is so much more than that. It is a really, really profound experience that deals with a lot of weighty life themes and isn't just about. It's very little of it is actually about the romance element at all. And there are kind of hentai scenes, but you can choose to turn them off if you want. So they're not really an issue either. It's so much more than the sum of its parts, and it's so much more than what it appears to be. It's also a really good example of the death of the author idea, because it's a fantastic piece of work that's incredibly profound, and then when you start looking into the authors and the people who wrote the dialogue and the people who put it together, a lot of them are actually kind of douchey, and you kind of lose a lot of respect for them. So it's a really good example of something where the author's intent or the life of the author or the motive of the author is completely irrelevant in the face of what they've produced. So that's my Katana Shoujo rant done. I highly recommend it. Go check it out. It's totally free.
I now too want to have a rant if it's still okay.
Okay. I'll tell you what, we'll just call these the final words. And
closing statements. Yeah.
Well, just harking back to how artistic and again educational games are. Assassin's Creed, I know I touched on it earlier, but it's totally an immersive world. I come away from playing Assassin's Creed, I've picked up Italian phrases, Arabic phrases, and again, it works as a cross-media thing. So you've got comic books, the soundtrack, and now hopefully movies down the line too. So again, novels that weave in and out of it too, and graphic novels, because again, Assassin's Creed 3, there's sequences in that work well, but again, work on a whole other level if you know who certain people are from other books. Just wanted to throw that in.
And do you have any
Alright, just on the whole
Baba
idea
Booey, Baba Booey.
of just on the whole idea of like video games being art, I think you just have to look at the rise of the industry to realize that they have stopped being a hobby in every sense of the word, and started being a very relevant form. And that's pretty much all I have to say on that matter.
Like, I think
Video games,
earlier
play them.
definitely earlier I
Except
think we
don't play
mentioned that
crap
like
ones, and don't buy
oh
crap ones, and don't be a twat. That's
no,
about
none of that. I think earlier we mentioned like you might have a different attitude towards how you approach video games depending on what way you were brought up with them. So if you were brought up in a household that might not have video games, it could be a lot easier for you to say, it's just a game. But
Mm.
an interesting fact is that I was playing Flower a couple of weeks ago there, and my dad came home from work, and normally his attitude is turn that machine off. And he came home and saw this and went, what's this one? I was like, you don't really do anything. You just kind of drift around and tap all the flowers there, make some music. And he left it on. So you won't get a better endorsement than that.
Oh my god,
Um,
I can't believe we never talked about Mole Industria. The guys who make the Flash games about the political topics. That just came back into my head. Check out Mole Industria as a really good artistic games developer guy. They're an indie game collective. They make games you can play them for free online. One of their games, as one example, is it's you are a priest and you have to molest children, right? And you have to keep the children from telling anyone about it. But the point of this game is that it's horrendously difficult. It's impossible to do. It's like impossible to complete even one level on it. And the point,
Maybe
the
you
ultimate
shouldn't.
point, yeah, the point of that whole thing is the statement they're making is this was not easy to cover up. The clergy devoted a lot of time and energy to cover this up and to keep it quiet for so long. It's not an easy thing to hide, and you're not going to be able to hide it easily in this game either. So it's one example. That's one example of the type of points that they make with their games, and they use everything from the visuals to the actual gameplay to the mechanics to the difficulty level. They use everything to make statements. They're very interesting. Mole Industria, it's two L's, MOLEINDUSTRIA. I think that's what they're called. You'll find them if you Google Mole Industria. Anyway, they're really, really interesting.
Just actually to add to that, I was playing Papers, Please recently, and that game is amazing because one of the things is because your job is your immigration, so you're just taking people's passports and reasons for coming into the country and deciding whether or not you want to let them into the country. And first of all, there's terrorist attacks in it, which I think is kind of incredible in itself because it's a game that's self-aware of the idea of terrorist attacks and how they just happen. Which I really like. I think that's making a statement in itself about what terrorist attacks are. But one of the things of it is that you'll be given these things like you're running out of food at home and you have to feed your kids, so you have to let more people into the country, and more people into the country that you may not necessarily want to leave into it and stuff. And the game gets more difficult like that, and it gives you these really, really emotionally ambiguous situations where you have to remove yourself from the idea of what you perceive the job to be like and realize what the job is actually like. And just going on from that, there's another game that's in beta at the moment that's about running a prison. And one of the big points of it is that you're a prison architect, and you have to make you have to build a prison and make sure that like there's places for every part of the prison to work. And one of them is that there has to be a place to execute people because the game makes it mandatory that the death penalty exists. And one of the things the game highlights is that you get paid more depending on how many executions take part in your prison. That actually exists and happens in America. And because of this game, it's now becoming more into news and stuff, that it actually that this is a thing, and that there have been cases before where judges have been brought up about putting people to the death penalty because they were getting extra money off the people that were executing them in the prison. And I think that that in itself is a very very bold statement, but it shows how much gaming can represent these statements and show them to you in a very bold way, in a very kind of you're not just being told about it, you are becoming it kind of way. That really it takes the escapism and uses it to teach you something and uses it to enlighten you to certain aspects of life. So yeah, stuff.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
I think I'll try my best to wrap up at this point. But for me, I think we've progressed so far in terms of technology, and we have come so far in this whole idea of it's no longer, your identity is no longer singular. There's no, it's, you have a local identity, you have a national identity, and now you have a global identity. We're so connected now, and I think, and that's purely down to the media, but in particular the internet. I mean, that has opened up entire worlds, of like, and with information being the biggest, and gaming as part of that, gaming as its own media, and then gaming attached to the internet. Every day, I mean, you sit down at your Xbox or your PlayStation or your 3DS, your laptop, you're sitting down, you're switching on, and you are opening up your world to thousands of other people. You might not necessarily interact with them, in the same way you would interact with your friend or the postman or your teacher or your colleague, but you are interacting with a person. There is a person behind that character. That person is black, they're white, they're young, they're old, gay, they're straight, they're a man, they're a woman, and they have their own opinions. They have their own they have their own life outside of this thing, outside of this game, outside of this product, outside of this art form. But they bring as much of themselves to it as you do. And no matter what you identify as, you are sharing something with somebody who's not you. You're sharing something with somebody else. And you can take so much more from a game than just, oh, I'm playing, I got to level 56. Oh, I have increased my mastery in, dual swords or in stealth. You can take a shared experience from something. You can take something new from another player. I mean, you play on a server, EU West is what your server is called. That encompasses France, England, Norway, Italy, Portugal, parts of Eastern Europe are lumped in there. I mean, you open your world up to thousands of other worlds, and to close yourself off to say that this game should only be about my world. This game should only be about what affects me. Um, it's not just ludicrous. It's entirely selfish. Um, a game Games these days are shared. Not everyone has the access to them, and that's an entirely different story or a different podcast. But they're shared. So for someone to literally, be it the individual gamer, the developer, or the publisher, to turn around and say this game should not include these people, is ludicrous. And it's entirely selfish. So I think going forward, the gamer, the developer, the artist, the composer, whoever it is, should be mindful that their game isn't just going to one audience. It's going to the audience, and that the audience is made up of millions of different people, who might take offense from it, who might weep at the end of it, who might think it's the worst thing they've ever played, who might think it's the greatest thing they've ever played. But you can't be, as an artist, and that's what these people are. The people who create these games are artists. Your vision, it can't. If you're going into this thing with a narrow vision, then you're shutting out so much more of the world that could only help you create something better. And my God, I hope that doesn't sound too preachy. That sounded preachy in my sounded less preachy in my head. But
No,
that's just what I wanted. That's how I felt during the week when I saw this company that, as a kind of as a child and as an awkward adolescent, that I looked up to. I mean, my life was like Nintendo, and then to see something like that, to read something like that, a part of me kind of just went, you know what, fine, that's it. it's over. It was kind of like a bad breakup.
Mm.
I, I was hurt by it, and I think I don't think I was the only other person who felt that way. Clearly, because the miiquality petition, the miiquality, I suppose the call to action is only getting bigger, and I think, and I hope that we, because I mean, I don't, I'm not, I don't mean negative about, I don't want to leave it on a negative note, but I do think, the world of gaming is growing. It might not be growing at the rate I wish it would.
Hopefully it continues to, though.
But that's it. I don't think, there's no stopping this anymore. The days of this elite, you know, the elite lurker who spends his time gaming and nothing but gaming, that's gone. That those are literally, they are, you know, I mean, they're shadows of what gaming used to be, and it's now that there's no such thing as, oh, I'm, you know, a hardcore gamer, I'm a casual gamer. That's gone. There are people who are passionate about gaming. There are people who enjoy gaming, and then there are people who don't. That's what we're looking at now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah.
So I think that's what they should be looking at, and it shouldn't be, oh well, you know, we have to have blank 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 and not blank and blank. It's for everyone, or if it's for no one.
I think as well, just stemming from that, I think like just representative of the whole Nintendo thing, stemming from that, the idea of a company, you know, being spineless like that and not, you know, and not standing their ground is like, this is just representative of like, you just can't anymore. Like if you're a big games company, you have to stand your ground, and you have to, you know, you have to, you know, stand one side of the fence or the other, but you can't just exist as a games company and not make a statement, because eventually you're going to have to, because as a growing media platform, people are looking to you for them, and you have to represent it in some way. You know, it's kind of you can't just sit there and be like, oh, we're not going to make a statement, you know.
Yep.
Hey, I think, yeah, I think we're actually at a point now where we should just leave it. And I think, I mean, I'm more than happy to, for people to comment on this, whether they agree or disagree, whether they don't think video games are art, whether they think we were, you know, blowing smoke.
Discussions are good. Discussion.
Yeah,
Let's debate. Have a discussion.
Good discussion though. Like, don't if
Yeah,
let's
not
let's
YouTube
throw the statement
comment
out there.
section
Like,
discussions.
if you leave a bad bigoted comment that isn't has no merit or value, you'll just be banned, or your comment will be removed flat out. Like,
Also,
it's
before
not.
we finish up, can I just did no one get the photograph I sent?
I did just now.
We
I
did,
sent you
yeah,
back
we
one.
did.
It said currently. It said the file isn't available to me. Doesn't like me.
Oh,
Oh.
that's probably for good reason.
Yeah, you're not missing out on anything there, man.
Okay. Oh wait, we weren't supposed to make that our desktop wallpaper.
Creepy
I'm
much.
flattered. I'm flattered.
Okay, I'm gonna pop it into the podcast because it's going on YouTube, so I'll just pop it in, so everybody
I'm
gets
glad
to
I
see it
didn't
now.
send my one.
Hopefully you stuck around for the whole thing. If not, well,
You're lost.
you're not even hearing this part, so screw you. For those of
They
you
won't
who did
even
stick
know.
around, I mean, I personally would like, and I know, I guess I can speak for everybody else. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are on it. And we'll hopefully get you back here for the next episode.